I am Robert Burnier. I am a sculptor who is trained as a painter, but now I'm mainly doing sculpture. And the work is less based on constructing things from scratch to be made into a sculpture as they are structures that I begin with and work against. They're mathematical models that are turned into a material such as metal that I react to. And the end result is a series of decisions that are there for the viewer to experience. You know, I want the craft to really match a sort of closeness to the form, and so I keep the method simple, but I also want to pay attention to some basic things about craft to make sure that the paint stays on and things like that. So I give it a good sanding beforehand because the form is going to get so complex that I will never be able to sand it afterwards, but the paint will go places I can't reach at that point. So if I sand all the little pieces first, then when it's together, it should be fine. It's important to me to really contemplate this idea of what you're making decisions about and what you're not. I very explicitly make something that's sort of unconscious. Unconsciousness, that's a philosophical question, like what part of these shapes am I deciding and what part am I not deciding? I think, you know, the initial mathematical form I start with is actually borrowed from some phenomena, like something being crushed or something just happening to an object. And then I trace those into the computer and I use those as a basis, which is sort of like this primordial situation for me. But then regardless of how it came to be, those forms are set. So I have to contend with that space. I don't start making a sculpture to, you know, make every bit and part conform to my will. It's more about like, what am I given and what can I do with it? A process of becoming, a process of like achieving a certain identity in each piece is more important to me than the conceptual completion of some task. So if I have a form and I'm going in some direction with it and I see, yeah, physically I could keep bending it, but maybe it's best to leave it right here because this kind of shows something about where I came from and where it could be headed. So that it's sort of almost like the sculpture is a bit of a slice in time or something like that. So even right now, if I join two pieces together, that join is like a scar. You know, it's gonna stay with it the rest of its life. So that point was actually given before it started. And it can be worked around almost like, you know, a pearl is created by an oyster. You know, it's just this irritant that has to stay. You can't really get rid of. So those are very important points that are outside my decision making, but at the same time, subject to it. The complications are opportunities as well. It's not like I think only in terms of the negative on that, but I know that, you know, I don't really think in terms of like abex or anything. I think much more in terms of conceptual art and process. The expressionistic part is a part. So, you know, you'll never see me flinging paint at a wall, at least probably not. I mean, who knows? I mean, you shouldn't say never, right? But at the same time, I'm really not necessarily like Saul LeWitt, where you just you walk away after defining something. And you know, Saul LeWitt's, I think one of the most fascinating things about Saul LeWitt is how beautiful the work can be. How the aesthetic can just transcend whatever he said to do. But also, I mean, you got to give him a lot of credit for some things like, you know, the way that he has this sort of infinite collaboration. I mean, there's things I really take from that, like the fact that people have to execute his work through the years over and over and over is this collaborative setup that, I mean, on one hand, he's relying on people to follow his instructions, but there's an intense craft. There's an intense sort of like dedication that person has to have to the work. And it's a different person every time, which is really pretty interesting. You ever see a modern sculpture that looks like it's soaring into the sky and just really is heroic and seems like it's just a world beater, you know? This very phallic thing that sometimes you'll see in a sculpture. It's like, that's what I just really don't want to see. Don't want to see that. There's all kinds of different strengths in the world, and they don't always have to be that strange, monumental type thing. So it's kind of anti-monumental in that sense. Like, if I stuck with forms like this, they're almost monumental to me because they're so definite and so just hard-edged and decisive in a way that's not reflective of how I feel like I move through the world.